Twilight's New Moon by Zoe Horse. Chapter 6. An Alicorn's Ascent. Trixie was frozen. Applejack was on the floor, struggling to breathe. The red magic energy from Twilight surrounding her neck. Applejack's eyes were starting to fade, and she glanced over at Trixie, pleadingly. This was enough to snap Trixie out of it, and she ran forward, tackling into Twilight. This disrupted the concentration of her spell. Applejack spluttered as her airways were suddenly open again. Trixie was doing her best to keep Twilight pinned down. Whatever power the Alicorn amulet had infused into her was making it difficult to contain. "Get off of me!" snarled Twilight, and with a blast of energy threw Trixie off, who landed next to a still recovering Applejack. "You started all this, and you shall suffer and pay for what you've done." Twilight's voice sounded almost modulated. There was her usual voice there, but also a much darker and deeper voice overpowering the usual vibrations of her voice. As she stood there, the maid-dress that she was still wearing looked much more intimidating than any pony could think possible. Trixie had remembered how she felt when she had the amulet on. It fed you lies and deceit to make you much more extreme. And, well, for the lack of a better term, evil. It seemed now that the spirit had been released and possessed Twilight. It was almost in complete control. Her ears flat against her head. She tried to talk back. "No, you're the one who... I'm going to annihilate everyone in this pathetic town as you watch and suffer," she screeched as tears flowed from her eyes. Twilight was still in there. Trixie gulped. She had an idea. An incredibly stupid idea. But hey, it was Trixie, so it was just an idea. "You think I, the great and powerful Trixie, cares about this pathetic town?" she scoffed. "What in the hay are you—" Applejack had managed to whimper out, but Trixie gave her a sharp kick to her foreleg to shut her up. "You know me, Twilight. No matter what you do, you'll never pass my little test." Twilight stood there, motionless. Trixie could see the faint outline of a blush on her cheeks as she let out another demonic wail, pushing her and AJ back a few feet again. Applejack had been heading towards a jagged piece of tree root, but Trixie had managed to push her out of the way quick enough as to not impale her. As Twilight screeched, 2 wings made of crimson flames burst out of her sides, and she launched herself into the air. Trixie looked up as she soared into the sky, illuminated by the setting sun. There was a moment of tranquility, as the wings seemed to vanish for a few fleeting moments. Then it all came crashing down. She suddenly shot down at one of the houses nearby, cruising like a fireball, and the colossal boom that followed was accompanied by flying bits of debris. The screams started to echo around as the faces from the edge of the crater vanished. "Trixie." Trixie jolted and looked over at Applejack, who had managed to get to her hooves. She looked furious, but kept her cool. "I don't know what you did to her, but you better have a way to fix her before she raises this town like a scythe on a flower bed," she said sternly, with a definite wobble in her voice. Trixie looked up to the edge of the crater, as she heard more explosions. This was all her fault, and not even in a self-deprecating way. She had caused all of this to happen. All because of a stupid spell-elementary school crush that she hadn't been able to get rid of. Her exploiting Twilight's strange obsession with her. She could feel the walls closing in around her as she started to hyperventilate. "Trixie!" Applejack placed a heavy hoof on her back, which caused her to splutter mid-half-breath. "You stopped her. You made her pause when you went all gloatin' pony mode again. Why would that have frozen her?" Trixie gulped. "We kinda, had a little thing going, Applejack stared. "You and Twi had a thing?" "Yep." "A romantic thing?" "More exotic." Applejack went to ask more questions, but stopped herself. "Twilight will be getting a very stern talking to when this is over," she grumbled. "Come on now, looks like you're the only one who can stop her rampage," she said, and helped her lead her out of the crater. Trixie had managed to steady her breathing, but the reality of how screwed she was truly dawning on her. The fate of all Ponyville, and possibly a large part of Equestria, landed on her. A fraudulent magician who couldn't even keep the love of her pony life close to her. As they reached the top of the crater, a hellscape had started to unfold. The town hall was ablaze, and the form of the great demonic Alicorn had begun to torch the entire town. Entire buildings seemed to crumple at her command, and ponies were being flung around like toys in a child's bedroom. Luckily, it seemed that the town was prepared. Most of the horses getting thrown were being caught by Pegasi, and those unicorns that were more magically inclined could be seen shooting up magical beams of energy. Nothing seemed to be working.
AJ, darling, are you alright? Rarity dashed over, taking cover from some of the falling debris, as she flung her arms around Applejack dramatically. Don't worry, I'm fine. But our Twi ain't looking so hot. On the contrary, my dear, she looks rather ablaze. Not the time, miss. Rarity rolled her eyes and talked back. But Trixie had zoned it out as she started to process. She knew that she had to be the key. She sat down and pressed her hooves tight against her skull. She needed to get close to her, but how could they slow her down long enough to talk? Think. Think, Trixie, think. For once in your life, use your brain. She thought of all of her experiences with Twilight over the last few days, and one stuck out to her more than any. Applejack, Rarity! What, do you have an idea? Replied Applejack, thankful to be rescued from Rarity's affectionate fussing. The great and powerful Trixie is full of ideas. Help me get into what remains of her library. We have a book to read. How in tarnation is a book going to save Twi? Trixie smirked. Trixie has a certain spell in mind, you see. Fluttershy was curled up in a ball inside the closest building she could find. She had initially sped over as soon as she had heard the explosion, and was horrified to see the crater that used to be Twilight's home. The sight of Twilight motionless in the pit as Trixie looked on had already been a horrifying sight. Their date must have gone disastrously, and as Trixie went over to check if she was okay, with Applejack descending into the crater, she didn't know if she could handle any more of this right now. Hey, Fluts, what's going on? Rainbow Dash had appeared with her usual rapid deceleration, causing the manes of all the ponies around her to get blown around in the draft. Fluttershy let out a scream of shock, and was left staring at her. All the wrong images started swarming around her brain again, and she shook her head. When in doubt, run. So there she was, curled up in a stranger's house, shivering like a kitten left out in the snow. Fluts! Flutters, where are you? No. Fluttershy didn't make a sound. She didn't want to be found right now. She wanted to remain lost. Hey, Rainbow Dash carefully approached as she spotted her. Go away, please, Fluttershy squeaked out in a shrill voice. Dashy stopped mid-step, head tilted. Twilight's going to be okay. Age is down with her now. Don't worry. Fluttershy didn't say anything as she looked up at Rainbow Dash, whose hair was a mess as always, who looked like she had just gotten back from a 4-hour jog, who looked like she'd been dragged through a bush backwards. It's not her, it's you. Fluttershy stopped herself. That wasn't the right thing to say at all. Me? Rainbow Dash raised an eyebrow of confusion. Fluts, what are you... In the window behind Rainbow Dash, there was a strange red light emanating. It was getting closer? Fluttershy realized that something was about to hit the building, and with the speed of a lightning bolt launched herself. Dashy! She screamed as she slammed into her. Fluttershy collided with the Rainbow Dash. Rainbow Dash collided with the table beside them, and the demonic form of Twilight Sparkle slammed into the house. Both Pegasi were blasted out the huge hole in the building. Rainbow Dash's eyes were wide with shock. She had little time to react, but she was the best flyer in Equestria. She stuck one wing out to make the two of them swivel in the air, enough so that when they had their rough landing, she would be on the bottom, and taking the brunt of the impact. The two landed on the ground, hard. Flutters curled up in a tight ball. Hey, you okay? Fluttershy was hugging her tight, not opening her eyes. She gave a quick nod. Okay, good, that's what's important. She rolled over with a wince. Fluttershy finally opened her eyes to see that Rainbow's left wing was twisted at an awkward angle. It was probably broken. What the hell was that thing? The pair looked into the sky to see Twilight hurling a tree at a building. Cries of help were coming from the town. Is that Twilight? Rainbow Dash mumbled. Upon hearing the cries, she looked into the town. We've got to go save them, come on!
But your wing, mumbled Fluttershy, managing to scribble up onto her hooves.
No wings? No problem. I'll save them with my raw awesomeness. Come on, she said, smirking through the pain, holding out a hoof towards Fluttershy. Fluttershy stared at her. She was so cool. How could she keep on going like it was nothing? That beautiful smile. How was she meant to match that?
She started to shake a little as her brain went to a bad place again. Hey, Shy, you with me? Rainbow Dash nudged her. Fluttershy was snapped out of whatever she was in. Yes! Then come on, we got a city to save. The pair began running into the fray, heading straight towards a nearby building where the cries of ponies beneath the rubble could be heard. Trixie was rapidly searching through books, searching all around the remains of the library. Applejack and Rarity were helping too, with the former anxiously keeping an eye on Twilight's destruction. My, all this over Rainbow Dash, murmured Rarity. I don't get the appeal myself. Trixie didn't have the emotional capacity to correct her at the moment. The search was so far fruitless. There was one more book that she could think of that might have the spell inside. Applejack, my dear. Don't call me that. Applejack, my compadre. Can you please smash this? Trixie threw over Twilight's strongbox, which skid to a halt at Applejack's feet. Applejack raised an eyebrow. You really expecting me to open Twilight's personal journal box? A huge explosion sounded in the distance. Twilight had just blown up the school. Don't worry, listener. There was nobody inside. Do you really have time not to trust me? Trixie replied. Applejack snorted angrily and stamped on the box. It shattered with ease. Applejack was one strong horse. Trixie scrambled to grab the book and rapidly flicked through it. She tried her best to not read the stuff she wasn't meant to, although one or two things did catch her eye. Was that fan fiction? Not the time. Eventually, she found the spell. She plopped down a hoof onto it. Aha! Just the spell I need. AJ looked down at the page, then up at her. A paralysis spell? Trixie nodded. Believe me, it will work. It'll allow me to get through to her again. Only thing is, I'm terrible at magic, so I'll need her close. What happened to you being the great and powerful? Chimed in an increasingly panicked tone as another great blast shot out from the town. I am both of those things, but only at close range. Both AJ and Rarity groaned. So what's your bright idea now? How do we get her close? Well, we need bait, and I know just who the perfect bait is, Trixie replied, beaming brightly. You? Perfectamundo, mon capitan. Applejack didn't speak fancily. Come on, I know a perfect spot, Applejack replied. We need to head to Sweet Apple Acres. Come on, Fluttershy, push! Rainbow Dash was doing her best to pull the wooden beam off Lyra. Fluttershy was trying her best too, but she was far weaker than her rainbow friend, exerting far more physicality than her body could really take. The pair managed to free Lyra. Lyra gave a nod of thanks before quickly limping away into the arms of Bonbon, who had just arrived. Okay, good work. Come on. Ah! Rainbow Dash had moved in a weird way, which had caused her wing to bend backwards again. She kept on smiling, but it didn't seem like she'd be able to hold on for much longer. Rainbow, please! We need to get you out of here, Fluttershy pleaded. She couldn't have this happen. She refused. But there's others to save, she said, tensing her leg muscles as she looked up at her, a steely determination in her eyes. Fluttershy stared back with huge sad eyes. But you need to save yourself. Pfft. No? All those other ponies are far more important than me. That's... Fluttershy was interrupted as she felt a huge gale of wind wash over her. Twilight had just landed, and was now marching towards them. Rainbow Dash snarled like a dog and went into an aggressive stance, her left wing clamped close to her body. Her right wing was raised. Who the fuck are you, and what the fuck did you do to Twilight? I am Twilight Sparkle, Elephant of Magic, here to annihilate any hope you had of control. The red flash in her eye made the back of Fluttershy's neck prickle. It was just like when Trixie had been wearing the amulet. This isn't you, she managed to squeak out, which only made Twilight laugh. Fluttershy, how pathetic. You can't even keep your pining crush from breaking a wing. No. Fluttershy let out a mangled wail as she felt her wings clamped tight to her side. She couldn't move. She couldn't think. Her plan of telling her had just been completely smashed and stamped on by a horde of rampaging wildebeest. Rainbow Dash's snarling was cut off suddenly as she looked back at Fluttershy with a confused shock. Fluttershy looked like she was going to explode. Twilight was staring right at Fluttershy as her horn glowed red. The red magic energy flowed around Rainbow Dash, who realized that this was happening a split second too late. Catch! Rainbow Dash was rocketed into the air with a loud scream, the loudness of which was only matched by the same noise coming from Fluttershy. She could see the pinprick that was Rainbow Dash in the sky, who was trying desperately to right herself. But with her broken wing, it was hopeless. Rainbow Dash was going to become Rainbow Crash, and then quite possibly Rainbow Splat. She was going to die. She was going to die, and it was all her. No! Fluttershy felt her wings unfurl as she found her body suddenly zipping into the sky after Rainbow Dash. Twilight was laughing below her, but her mind was focusing on one thing and one thing only: saving the chromatic aberration that made her life worth living. Rainbow Dash had just reached the peak of her trajectory and was starting to fall. As hard as she may be, she wasn't able to right herself properly and get herself into a stable falling position. Her heart was racing, and she shut her eyes tight. There wasn't any point in struggling. This was the end. Rainbow! The scream of panic only got louder as Fluttershy collided with her mid-air, managing to get her hoofs around her waist. Rainbow Dash was in a slight daze as they now fell together, with Fluttershy desperately using her wings to try and avert the tailspin. Fluts! Left wing up, right wing down! Rainbow Dash cried out. Fluttershy listened, and just as they were about to hit the cold, hard ground, Fluttershy managed to pull up. The pair were going faster than Fluttershy had ever flown before, and they crashed into a heap on one of the many hills of Sweet Apple Acres. Both lay on the ground, breathing heavily. Fluttershy couldn't believe it. She had saved her. She had saved her Rainbow Dash. She managed to get onto her hooves and looked down at Dashie, who was smiling up at her. Not bad, she said with her usual grin. You know, you're much stronger than you. Can I kiss you on the mouth? Fluttershy hadn't even realized the words were coming out of her mouth until she had already said them. She froze, her eyes wide. There was a palpable few seconds of silence between them, which was only broken by Rainbow Dash's smirk. Of fucking course you can, dude? She said, just about managing to cover how much she was into her request. Fluttershy let out a small squeak. She hadn't really prepared for what might happen after this, but there was only one way to find out. As the pair of them began to kiss, Trixie and Applejack, tailed not far behind by an exhausted Rarity, ran by towards the farm. Trixie caught a glimpse of them and shared a look with Applejack. About damn time, Applejack muttered with a smile. You know what they say about ponies with rainbow hair. Trixie did not know what they say. Eventually they got to the barn. Okay, everyone into position, said AJ, who moved towards the side center of the currently empty barn. Rarity moved herself to just behind the doors, and Trixie was right at the entrance. Darling, how do you intend to coax her over here? Asked Rarity sheepishly, looking at the red speck in the sky over the ablaze town. Oh, now that I do know, she said, looking back at Applejack while smirking. The great and powerful Trixie may be rather inept at being alive, but if there's one thing I can do... She grinned wider and turned to face the rampaging Twilight in the distance. I can put on a show. A huge amount of magical energy surrounded her. And her usual magician's hat and cape flashed onto her body as if by magic. Because it was magic. She raised both her hooves and stamped them on the floor, huge fireworks shooting up and bursting into the sky in the shape of Trixie's cutie mark. Trixie bellowed out, her voice amplified by her magic. Fillies and gentle colts, welcome to the grand show of the one, the only, the great, the powerful Trixie Lulamoon. Trixie could see the red streak in the distance stop and hover in the air. Fear not, my fine ponies. I know all seems dire. But I, the great and powerful Trixie, will vanquish this evil spirit inside of Twilight Sparkle. The flaming orb in the sky was now careening towards the barn. Applejack sighed. It feels like we have to raise this barn every other week, she groaned, getting her kicking leg ready. For it is I who's to blame for all of this. It was my illicit fling with your friend Twilight that caused this whole mess, and I assure you, I shall save the entirety of Equestria, single-hooved. The orb sped up. Steady, said Trixie, as Twilight seemed to break the sound barrier. Applejack got ready, as did Rarity. Steady, she said again, and just as Twilight hit the barn, Now! Trixie leapt out of the way. Applejack slammed her hind legs against the central support beam, and just as Twilight was in the barn, the whole building collapsed on top of her. Rarity used her telekinesis to quickly grab Applejack and fling them outside, landing in a heap. Here I go, Trixie gulped and ran into the wreckage. It didn't take long to find Twilight. She had already used some of her magic to start lifting the debris off, but Trixie was ready. Tensing and concentrating more than she ever had in her life, she cast the spell. The green ball shot out and hit Twilight just as she got to her hooves, wings spread wide, and pulsed around her form, locking her in place. Great and powerful success. What have you done to me? Do you really think the silly spell can hold the might of an Alicorn? She roared. She was still seemingly able to move somewhat, her entire body straining to break free from the spell. Trixie let out a big, terrified sigh. It was time. It was finally time. She needed to do what she had been avoiding this entire time, for her entire life. Actually telling the truth about her feelings. She approached her, and once again they were face to face, their muzzles but inches away. She could feel her own blush forming, and could see one on Twilight's face too. She was still in there. Twilight, she started, but shut her eyes. She didn't really know how to word it. Here, this is the only way I know how, she said, and cast another spell. It was a spell that her mother had taught her years and years ago, specifically for when she had issues with getting across what she was trying to say. She had never actually tried using it properly before today, instead opting for just boasting and covering it up with show. The pair's eyes suddenly shone white as their memories linked, Trixie showing her what she had been trying to tell her this entire time. Twilight was sitting on the steps of Spellmentary School. It was lunchtime, and she was reading a book, her glasses firmly placed on her muzzle. She didn't see the football coming. It struck her in the side of the face, cracking her glasses, and with a little oomph, she landed on the concrete, grazing her hoof. She looked up, tearfully, to see the group of earth ponies, pointing and laughing at her. Twilight opened her mouth to try and come up with some sort of witty comeback, but she got too tongue-tied and just ended up sobbing, causing their laughter to increase. She looked around desperately for someone to help her, but nobody was interested. Twilight hadn't made any friends. She sat there, alone and crying. Trixie had just been about to tuck into her special homemade lunch. Oat burger, fruit salad, and a special mint green chocolate chip cupcake for her dessert. The filly's hair was up in the twin bunches that her mum usually tied for her as she watched from a nearby bush, that she usually spent her lunch breaks in, practicing little magic tricks with the sticks and leaves that surrounded her. But then those mean young ponies arrived and started to bully Twilight, and Trixie had seen it all. She could feel the anger and rage built up inside of her. She wanted to banish those little fillies straight into Tartarus, but as good and strong as she believed she was, she knew she didn't currently have the capability. She tried to work up the courage to actually go out and speak to her, but she couldn't seem to get her body to move in the right way. She looked around desperately for something, anything that could help, and that's when she remembered her dessert. Twilight was sobbing into her hooves as she felt a little nudge against her flank. She opened her teary eyes and looked to her left. Huh? There was a cupcake? Tentatively, she gave it a sniff. Mint. Like toothpaste? She didn't like toothpaste, but there was chocolate mixed in with that. She bit into it slowly, and her eyes lit up. It was so tasty. She carefully ate the rest of it, and out a little giggle. It had completely saved what had been one of the most upsetting lunches of her life. She looked around, bright-eyed, licking the green frosting off her lips, wondering who had given her this savior cupcake. But there was nobody there. Trixie remained in the bush, smiling to herself. She made Twilight smile, and for some reason, that's all that mattered in the world to her right now. The memory faded, and the now adult ponies were left, staring into each other's eyes. Twilight's eyes were streaming with tears, now back to its usual color. Trixie was smiling weakly, trying to hold back the tears in her own. It was you? Twilight whispered. I've always cared about you, Sparks, replied Trixie, the tears now slowly dropping out. The fiery wings on Twilight's back extinguished. The two stood there, facing each other, and to them, nothing else existed in that moment. Just the two of them. Together. They leaned in and kissed, and for the first time, it was a kiss of emotion rather than passion. After what seemed like forever, they pulled away, both smiling weakly. Twilight looked slightly upwards, and her face dropped suddenly. Look out! Trixie turned around to see a red spectral form of an alicorn above them, shaking violently and turning red as it exploded in a wave of pure energy.
Trixie went up on her hind legs, spreading her forelegs wide to shield Twilight from the blast.
Trixie, no!
The entity erupted. Everything went white. 2 days later, the first thing that Twilight was aware of was the sound of birds chirping. Her ear flicked as she felt a cool breeze wash over her face. Slowly, she opened her eyes. She was looking up at the ceiling of the Ponyville Hospital. Looking down at herself, she could see she was in a hospital bed, with some bandages around her hooves and torso. She let out a little whine of pain as she felt a stabbing pain on her back in 2 spots. It was where the wings had come out. She shuddered. She hadn't been fully aware of what happened after she had hit Trixie with that spell in her basement, but she could remember hatred and fear, and setting fire to buildings. That too. One more memory began to bubble to the surface as she looked over to see.
Twilight! Goodness, you're finally awake.
Fluttershy shuffled over to her bed and gave her a hug, which she immediately protested.
Fluts,
she said, her bones feeling as if they were made of sharp steel with the amount of pain movement gave her. Fluttershy squeaked and moved away, but couldn't contain her excitement at seeing her friend awake.
Sorry, we were all so worried about you. What happened?
Fluttershy looked even more meek than usual.
Well, whatever was in that amulet seemed to possess you for a bit. You kind of destroyed half the town.
Twilight shuddered again.
Did anyone? Everyone's mostly okay, she said. A few little injuries here and there. And tricks, yeah.
She seemed to cut herself off. Twilight was too out of it to pick up for now.
But don't worry, Princess Celestia came over to help fix the town. She even left you those, she continued,
pointing to the huge wreath of sunflowers beside her bed. Twilight let out a little giggle. She always was a little extra.
I'm so sorry.
Twilight, watch my mouth.
Twilight did.
None of this is your fault. And everyone is okay.
Some are even better, she said.
Wait, what do you mean?
Wait!
Twilight began to question what she was saying, but was distracted, as she had been watching Fluttershy's mouth as requested. She could see traces of blue fur.
Fluttershy, is that blue fur on your muzzle?
Fluttershy's cheeks shone a bright crimson as she gave a little smile.
Maybe?
Twilight felt the smile swell on her face as she raised an eyebrow.
So you and Dashy?
Fluttershy gave an embarrassed little nod.
Yes, you did. I'm so proud. Ow!
Twilight had sat up to hug her, but it was hurting a lot. She didn't care much, though, as she squeezed Fluttershy tight. The bubbling memory in the back of her mind was beginning to resurface. At the end of the ordeal, she blushed. Trixie had kissed her. Trixie had explained how she knew. How she had always been there. Then the image of Trixie diving in the way of her. Oh no, if she was like this whilst protected.
Fluts?
Fluttershy looked over, still smiling. The smile dropped as she saw Twilight's worried expression.
Where's Trixie?
Fluttershy froze, eyes darting around.
She...
Panic rose in Twilight's throat.
Where is she, Fluttershy?
Fluttershy looked like she was about to cry as she rubbed her hoof, but was saved as the door burst open.
You're alive and okay, not dead and living and still have all of your limbs.
Pinkie was the first one to bound through the door, a party cannon exploding in the room after her. The rest of her friends came in, Rainbow Dash immediately fluttering in next to Fluttershy, giving her a kiss on the cheek. Fluttershy looked like she was in heaven. It's good to see you up and okay, Sugar Cube, Applejack said with relief, though there was a hint of delicacy in her voice.
Yes, quite. It seems you're going to make a full and complete recovery, added Rarity.
Twilight was thankful to see her friends, but one thing was still very much on the forefront of her mind.
Where's Trixie?
Everyone's well-wishings went silent, as everyone looked around at each other, each of them wincing. Even Pinkie Pie stopped bouncing. Slowly, everyone looked to Applejack. She looked confused for a moment, before rolling her eyes. Of course, honesty. She went to Twilight's bedside. Twilight was shaking a bit. No. Twi, there's something we need to tell you. Twilight was staring, tears welling in her eyes. No. It's about Trixie. She took that blast head on and... No. She couldn't be dead. They had only just finally connected. Well, she Twilight, I don't know how to tell you this, but the walls were caving in around Twilight as she stared into Applejack's sad eyes. She couldn't be gone. Trixie, well, Did I hear that my girlfriend is awake and conscious?
Twilight's eyes opened as wide as they could, as everyone turned to look at the door. Standing there, none of her usual outfit on, with her fur and mane looking flawless and without injury,
was Trixie Lulamoon. Twilight tried to get words out, but failed. A strangled cry of relief left her mouth. She was so relieved everyone else remained deadly silent. You're okay. Oh, Twilight, my little mint chocolate cupcake, she said, and smugly smirked the biggest and smuggest smirk she had ever smirked in all of her countless days of smirking smugly. I'm far better than okay. Trixie unfurled her wings. Trixie unfurled her wings. Twilight blinked, then blinked again. Trixie had wings. What? What? That could only mean one thing. Trixie ruffled her new wings smugly. That's right, Twilight. Trixie was an Alicorn. What the fuck? Twilight was frozen. The gears were turning in her head, but said gears were miles apart. The room remained a tense silence for what seemed like aeons. Everyone out, said Twilight, shortly and sharply, whilst staring directly at Trixie. Everyone looked back. Everyone looked to Applejack, who nodded swiftly. Everyone but Trixie quickly left, and the door was shut. It was just them. One thought was running through Twilight's brain, one that she eventually was able to put into words. You have got to be fucking kidding me. There was one more thought trailing behind, that one too, that she, for now, kept to herself. Trixie looks so damn good right now. Struggling, Twilight dropped down out of bed and walked towards Trixie. Trixie had grown a little, and now, instead of being the same height, was now about 6 inches taller than Twilight. Twilight was breathing in and out heavily as she reached her, having to crane her neck up a little. Trixie looked down with her usual, clearly you don't own an air fryer raised eyebrow look. You, Twilight said, shaking like a leaf, before bursting into tears and hugging Trixie. You're okay, she whimpered. Trixie was taken aback and dropped the act. I am, Sparks. The two collapsed into a heap together, laughing and crying a bit. Twilight eventually pulled away, looking at her new wings. How? Trixie shrugged. I'm not entirely sure. I spoke to Celestia about it. She knew my name. Can you believe it? Twilight decided it was not a good time to tell her about the letters she had sent to Celestia about her. She said she'd look into it, but that it was likely to do with some sort of mass transfer of emotion and power. I'm not sure, but hey, I'm kind of a god now, she said, beaming, so that's pretty neat, if I do say so myself. Twilight was looking up at her, blushing slightly. And I can only imagine what the pathetic little Twilight Sparkle thinks of a great and powerful girlfriend, Trixie, she said, giving her head a little nuzzle. Twilight could feel the Trixie fog returning in droves, but managed to break through. Trixie, can we talk properly for a moment? Trixie's smile dropped, but she nodded. I do want to make this work, and she blushed and looked away. I do enjoy it when you're mean to me. Trixie grinned. But I would ask that if I ask you to stop, and I stamp my hoof, you actually stop. Please. Trixie's grin didn't fade. Of course. Anything for my princess. Twilight felt relief wash over her body. Well, technically speaking, I'm your princess now, aren't I? Huh? Well, seeing as I'm an Alicorn now, I'm now a princess, which means you are one of my subjects now, and I get to sit at the table with your mentors. What? Twilight's eyes went wide. Absolutely not, Trixie. You are not my mentor. Is that some protest I hear? She said, and wrapped her wings around Twilight, pulling her closer. Twilight could feel her cheeks flare up. Yes, I am not having you. Trixie put a hoof to her lips. She was back in the stupor. Not having me what, Sparky? She said, smiling wide. Her eyebrow raised. Fuck. She still had it. Fuck you, mumbled Twilight, and the pair began to kiss. The end.
Hello, Smee Bunny. Guess what? We just finished our first long-form fic. Yay! Woo!
Again, I'm plugging Santa, aka Red Hoodie 21's GoFundMe. He's raising money to get him and his cat Oscar out of an abusive home. More info can be found in the GoFundMe linked below. If you do donate, you can take a screenshot of the donation receipt and email it to me at bunnyblastYGO@gmail.com. Then I'll send you the current fics I'm narrating up to 4 weeks in advance, as soon as I finish them. Beyond that, this Friday, we will be finishing Magic Disagrees by Red Hoodie 21. And next Tuesday, we will be starting a new fic, Shine Brighter by Sunshine. Bye!